All right. Well, just to kind of go ahead and get us kicked off, we're going to have some more folks kind of jumping in, but looks like we have a solid group of a little over 60 right now. And so we'll go ahead and get the webinar started. So I'd first like to introduce myself. My name is Sarah Derdowski. I'm Executive Director of the Global Energy Management Program at CU Denver Business School. And I'm also the Program Director for Women's Energy Network Colorado. So I'm really excited to be here today and to share my two passions. They've come together at this perfect storm. So really excited to kind of take this part two of our energy transition series. So just a little bit about Women's Energy Network, if you're not familiar with what we do. You can see from the slide here, we're an energy organization. We welcome all energies, and we are there to kind of empower energy professionals. We provide education, leadership, networking, and we do a lot of different events. We'll talk a little bit about what those are coming up here in the next month. But as you can see, we do everything from podcasts to a lot of webinars these days, but even some in-person pieces such as Women's Workout and Wine as we slowly kind of come back to normal. Oh, thanks so much. Here's the next dates we have coming up. If you haven't joined any of our virtual events like our virtual wine tasting, our amazing race, please do. It's a great way to kind of get to know people a little bit more and also network throughout the pandemic. So that's a fantastic thing to do. One of the big things we have coming up education-wise is our Week of WinCo. That's our last event in October. Definitely get a chance to jump in and participate in that. There's a lot of engagement, small groups, breakout sessions, things like that. And there'll be a lot more details on that to come. So stay tuned for those pieces. Next, so this webinar is called Energy Transitions. This is really a second part of our series. First one, the Global Energy Management hosted, was on renewables. That was a fantastic one. We'll have a link for it for you because I think it's really important as you think of yourself as an energy professional, if that's why you're on this webinar, to learn a little bit more of how you can position yourself as an energy professional, whether you were in oil and gas before, maybe more on the financial side. We want to give you some real hard skills and takeaways. And so that first webinar was with Jenny Brett from RES and Lee Morrison from AMP. And a couple of the two key points they had, which is know yourself and your skills and how you can make yourself an energy professional. So, you know, don't be a reservoir engineer, be a data hound or something like that, so that you can really speak the language of the other side of the industry. And one of the other points they had was, you know, be hungry for knowledge and a willingness to constantly learn. And I know our panelists are going to talk about those points directly, but wanted to let you know we want to build on those points to keep giving you some tools on how you can make a transition if that's really what you're looking for today. So why did we choose utilities? Renewables is a great sector to transfer your skills into, but utilities is truly that perfect storm. So it's a periphery industry if you were in oil and gas. Some companies even own oil and gas assets, like Black Hills is an example of that. But you know, it's going to also teach you how to see where there's similarities across the industry. And again, really think of yourself as this energy professional and how you can do that. So I'm going to stop talking so much, but I do want to run through how this webinar is going to go down. So I am joined by three incredible women. We have Caley van Cleave from Iridium. We have Andrea from Summit Energy, and we have Carrie from Xcel. All these women come from the industry from very different sides of the house, which is fantastic. So hopefully they can provide some resources and skills for you individually, but they also are experts in their field. So the financial side, the operations side, and the people side, if you will. So how this is going to go down. I really think it's important that you guys ask questions as we go along. I would rather there be no questions at the end and we answer them as the conversation is flowing. I think that makes for a much better webinar. We've all been on a lot of these, so let's make this as much of a conversation as we can. So please put into that Q&A box any questions anytime, and I'll try to incorporate those throughout the session. But the way we'll structure it is I do want to kick off the beginning of this with really kind of breaking down what utilities, it's a very broad term, utilities. There's these massive kind of regulated monopolies, there's munis, there's all these different pieces. And I want you to really kind of understand a little bit about that before we start talking specifically about the people side and where you might see yourself fit in. I think that that piece is really important. So to kick us off, I'd like Carrie, if you could, just give a little bit of your background too, so that we can know a little bit more of who you are, and then start talking a little bit about how Xcel is seen in the marketplace, you know, as its regulated monopoly.
Yeah, sure. So as Sarah said, my name is Carrie Dixon. I'm a market operations manager at Xcel Energy. And primarily in my job, I focus on developing energy policy and strategy. And I also represent our interests in various industry forums, particularly related to the wholesale sector. But I also do get involved in some of the fun activities that we have at the state and federal regulatory levels as well. So that's me in a nutshell. And I think we have a slide here that I sent to Sarah that just might provide a good visual overview of Xcel Energy as a utility. So a lot of you are probably joining us from somewhere here in Colorado. So you probably have some familiarity with Xcel Energy already, if not getting a bill directly from us every single month. But for those of you who maybe aren't as familiar with us, we are a major US electric and natural gas company with operations in 8 states. We provide a comprehensive portfolio of energy-related products and services to about 3.7 million electricity customers and 2.1 million natural gas customers through our various regulated operating companies, which you can see on this slide here. Xcel Energy is an investor-owned, vertically integrated utility, which means that we own generation, transmission, and distribution assets. So from the time that your electricity is created or generated to the time that it is delivered to your home or your business, we kind of own every piece of that process there. So that's just what it means to be a vertically integrated utility. We own over 100,000 miles of electric transmission lines and more than 200,000 miles of electric distribution lines. So think highway, byway level. We also own several 100,000 miles of natural gas transmission and distribution lines and have quite a bit of natural gas storage capacity as well. We own about 19 gigawatts of generation capacity, which is comprised of a pretty diverse fuel mix, which currently includes coal, natural gas, nuclear, wind, solar, hydro, and a few others. But I don't know if how many of you are familiar with the recent carbon reduction goals that we announced as a company. So that diverse fuel mix is going to change with some of those initiatives that we have kicked off. So for those of you that aren't familiar, we were the first major utility to set a vision to serve our customers with 100% carbon-free electricity by 2050 and to reduce our carbon emissions 80% by 2030 company-wide from 2005 levels. And we actually just had our largest one-year decline in carbon emissions in 2019. So we've reduced levels to 44% since 2005, which puts us more than halfway to our 2030 goal. So definitely not only an exciting time to work at Xcel Energy, but also an exciting time to work in the electric utility space as other companies have started to announce similar goals as well.
Well, thanks, Carrie, for that. And for those of you who were paying attention to, you know, they're vertically, thank you, integrated company. That piece is really important because as complex as utilities are, lots of people don't even own their own transmission. And then again, if you're thinking about coming into renewables, how the renewables piece plays into some of these large scale utilities as well. So just something to kind of keep in the back of your mind as you're thinking about a transition and where you might fit in. Would it be into one of these smaller vendors? Is it into the transmission side? Is it on the generation side? Kind of where your skill set might kind of fit. So Really appreciate that, Carrie. And you're right, it's an exciting time to be in utilities for sure, especially everyone's at home. Everyone thinks we're using so much more electricity and stuff, which may or may not be the case, but certainly paying attention to it to a lot more, which is really great to hear. Well, Andrea, we'd love to hear from you. Talk to us a little bit about Summit and kind of maybe how they're different and kind of what your goals are on your side of the house.
Sure. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Andrea Guntren. I'm the Director of Treasury for Summit Utilities. We're headquartered here in Colorado. Just a little bit about my background. It's very different. I actually started my career in Silicon Valley, working for a lot of multinational companies, moving money all over the world and different strategy, foreign exchange, that type of thing. And so coming into utilities is quite different for me. But a little bit about Summit Utilities. For those of you in Colorado, you probably don't know us as Summit Utilities, but more Colorado Natural Gas. We are a much smaller company from Xcel, completely opposite what you find. We started out actually in Colorado, headquartered, and our founders were looking for a way to serve more of the underserved rural population, kind of where Xcel ends and where we want to start. And so that's how we got started here in Colorado. I have a couple slides here. Just our mission is to deliver clean, safe, affordable, and reliable energy to our customers and our communities. Being a very small utility company, we're really big in our communities where we operate. And these are some of the things that kind of define our culture and who we are. Safety is number one type of thing for us. Focus on our customers and just collaboration on that. If you move to the next slide, please. So this is a little bit about where we are located. We're headquartered here in Colorado. We also have operations in Missouri with Summit Natural Gas of Missouri, in Maine, which is Summit Natural Gas of Maine. And then about 3 years ago, we purchased Arkansas Oklahoma Gas, which serves both Arkansas and Oklahoma for us. And we've got different offices throughout those locations. We've also won quite a few awards, which are very, I should go back. Unlike Xcel, we've only got about 400 people. I think Carrie showed on her slide that she had 11,000 people at her company. So quite a big difference there for us. And we are a privately owned company. And so really, without getting too detailed into the ownership structure, we are responsible really for 40,000 families who have their pensions in our company. So when we think about that as a company and the work that we do, it's really important for us. And then we're serving about 120 rural communities in the 5 states that we operate in. We've won several awards recently that we're really proud of. We just recently got 5 stars on the GRESB Award, which is an international award kind of for ESG. Community service awards. We were just named in Denver Business Journal for one of the Fast 50. We just recently found out that we were awarded one of the best companies to work for, both in Arkansas and Maine, that we had applied for. So it's rewarding to work for a company that's so involved in communities and doing the right thing. We also have several renewable projects that we're working on, particularly in Maine, with some digester projects. So even though we're a small utility, we've got a lot going on, and it's a fun place to work.
Thanks, Andrea. And it's certainly interesting to see, like you said, 400 versus 11,000, but it allows you to do different things as well. We have a couple questions, and one comes from actually an alumni here, talking about R&D. And Carrie, I know a little bit about this, but if you could speak to how Xcel maybe collaborates with NREL, or does it do its own R&D research?
So yeah, I think, we partner quite a bit with NREL, as well as some various other, energy labs to collaborate on future technologies. We have a few folks that are in the R&D department internally to Xcel, but we primarily work with these outside entities to vet and understand emerging technologies and what might be viable options down the road.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I know that NREL has collaborated quite a bit in the past with Xcel, especially being so localized here as well, which is really nice to see. And Andrea, this might be a question for you too. It just talks about the breadth of what utilities go all the way down to, which is all the way touching to, are you using natural gas in your home for heating and cooling? What is maybe Summit doing about that? And then Xcel too, what are you guys doing? Or are there any programs working on reducing natural gas usage in the home?
I can talk a little bit about that. I'm probably not quite as versed in that with my role, but we're doing a lot of projects right now in a lot of the states, kind of building up our capacity, and where we are able to go into some of these smaller communities to serve those. We've got a mix of people from residential to small commercial to large commercial that we work through. So it kind of depends on that we're dealing with and what their needs are. So, within a home, any place that could use natural gas, we're able to service that. Larger commercials might have something special going on. I mentioned earlier that we are working on a project in Maine as a big renewable project for us to help us up in that area, and also with all the credits that we are able to offer our customers through that program.
Yeah, and so I think from the Xcel side, we definitely encourage our customers to use more efficient systems in their homes. I believe we have a few rebate programs that people can take advantage of. So if you replace your air conditioner with a more higher efficiency air conditioner or natural gas furnace, we have several incentives for those as well. But I do know that there are certain cities out there who are taking that a step further, and they are introducing policies to, completely eliminate the use of fossil fuels in homes. So I think that's definitely something that's going to be coming down, the pike here in the future, and that's something that's definitely going to be impacting utilities. So I think that's a great question, and it's very relevant, and that is something that we're definitely aware of and looking at in the future.
Absolutely right, that it's more policy driven kind of on new builds, things like that, but then also retrofit. So great question. And I think it shows you again, like how broad the industry is all the way down to your home, to what type of fridge, what type of furnace you have. It can really touch every aspect of your life. So there's lots of space in there for folks to jump in. Well, this is predominantly about workforce and how you transition into these sorts of things. So Caley, I definitely want to kind of jump over to you. Obviously, give us a little bit about yourself, but coming in it from the recruitment side, working, specifically with companies to fill roles and positions, you kind of see both sides of the house, what skill sets people have, who's in the market right now, and then how you can kind of pair those up. So could you talk to us a little bit kind of about trends though in hiring and stuff right now as well, so people can kind of get a feel for what that marketplace looks like?
Absolutely. So my background is I've been predominantly in energy, focused heavily on the people components of the industry itself. So with Iridium Consulting, what we do is we focus entirely across the full energy spectrum. So oil and gas, power utilities, renewables, kind of the full mix, very similar to kind of Jen's kind of full spectrum mix as well. And so each one of these sectors you would think have exceedingly different needs. But when you actually kind of roll up your sleeves and talk through what the workforce trends look like and the needs of these organizations, whether it be oil and gas versus power and utility versus renewable, actually there's a lot of similarities. And I think it's almost like a misnomer that we kind of have, that we kind of see our own kind of camp. We don't really see the broader spectrum. So hiring trends, some things that I find really interesting, and I'll include, I think, or we will include at the end of the conversation, a resource on the global energy what is it, Global Talent or Energy Talent Index report that they did last year. Now, albeit things have changed dramatically given our current 2020 scenario, but I think it's a really great document if you're looking seriously at making shifts in your career to look into a different sector within the energy kind of family. It's a great resource. It's one of those things that breaks down kind of initiatives across all three kind of major areas. And one thing that's kind of fascinating is from oil and gas perspective, which I think a lot of people, our conversations are, how do we shift from oil and gas into maybe a different area? We're looking at, according to this report, it's about 73% of oil and gas professionals are looking to make that move. And the funny trend, or I think is funny or interesting, is the first kind of area that they look to is renewables, because it gets a lot of press and conversation. It's something that is very much in our dialogue. And fewer percentage of them are actually looking at power and utilities for that transition. And I think that has to do with the fact that we might not communicate the true value that's out there for a worker to join that segment. And so trends, I think we're going to see power and utilities probably increase in their desirability from former oil and gas individuals or transitioning energy professionals. And I think it's like close to 19% of them, according to the report, are thinking about power and utilities. So that's still a sizable chunk of the former oil and gas crowd. So definitely trends, there's all kinds of great trends on that, and we'll probably dive into it. You can tell by the ladies on the call. Andrea, I mean, her background from Silicon Valley, coming in, from a kind of money management standpoint, those skill sets are absolutely essential in a variety of different components of the energy space. So I think your story, Andrea, is very similar to a lot of the individuals that we work with on our private career coaching and also with our placement services with organizations. So I don't know if I answered your questions, but.
No, that's great, Caley. And then, something else to mention is, I know a lot of folks who are transitioning are looking for that transition from oil and gas, as we said, look at renewables. But, renewables are tied into utilities. And I think that piece is really important. And then the also thing that I think is important to think about, oil and gas had this big crew change that we all knew about and heard about, and thanks to some downturns, they still have that crew change, but they have a lot of potential for folks to jump out of oil and gas, and where are they going to go because of these downturns? Well, utilities also has this big crew change that was going to happen. It was just not spoken about as much. Perhaps utilities wasn't that sexy industry that it's now starting to become a little bit. And so there's going to be huge opportunity if you position yourself properly to come into the utility space, because they have that lack of leadership, that kind of barbell of, kind of your senior folks and kind of your entry folks, but not a lot kind of in the middle there. So if you are at the middle part of your career, which I imagine a lot of you are, this is a great industry to kind of come into if you can kind of position yourself properly with your skill set, which you guys have a huge skill set to offer. So I think that piece is really important. And then I also think it speaks to a lot of oil and gas companies are really involved in the community, especially here in Colorado. We have a lot of independents here who are really engaged where their assets are. And I think, utilities are also that way. Andrea, you speak about you guys up in Maine, you are probably there at community organizations, really kind of tapped into what the needs are there, and Xcel here as well. And I think that would speak to some of the value systems of the demographics of folks who are looking to make these transitions. So I think that's also a really important thing to keep in mind as you look at a company and an organization you want to join, that you can see from their mission statements that they want to be involved in those communities. And maybe you can align yourself to some of those as you look for kind of jobs. Well, back to kind of the workforce questions here. Carrie and Andrea, when you think about hiring someone, again, what are some of those pieces that your company might look for, maybe they look for when they were hiring you, or when you're hiring people that would kind of help people make the transition? What are some pieces that it's not just saying, listing all their petroleum background or something like that? What would be something that stands out that makes you want to take a risk on somebody that maybe doesn't have a full utilities background? Maybe you could share some of that information for our folks.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say from the Xcel perspective and kind of what we've been looking for and a lot of the people that we've been hiring recently is, like I mentioned in my overview of Xcel Energy, there are a lot of changes that are happening in the industry right now. And so, I really think right now we really highly value people that, are very flexible, can think outside of the box, very resilient, self-starter type of thing, especially right now. As you can probably tell, I'm still working from home, as I'm sure a lot of you are right now. And that definitely has presented another challenge in terms of collaborating with fellow coworkers. And so I think, as cliche as it sounds, I feel like right now, people who are like self-starters and like willing to take initiative and really trying to like think outside of the box and work independently are just general things that are so important and so valuable right now.
Mm-hmm. Flexibility.
Yeah, to jump in on that, Carrie, kind of on that same regard, one of the things that we see work really well when you're trying to make that career transition is to not just simply say like self-starter, problem solver, but kind of take that deep dive. And when you're actually presenting yourself in your resume, showcase that in a storyline, almost like a narrative that highlights where you have been flexible. Say your organization went through a major restructuring, or you guys had a really challenging CapEx project that really needed the buy-in from the community, and you were able to get that or assist in that program, and show that as an example. So that way, when you get into the conversations with somebody, say for example at Xcel, you have something that's tangible that you can talk through, that you feel strongly about, and also that you're probably going to have a little bit more ease in discussing with them. So definitely make sure you kind of add that level of detail, think through it kind of one layer or two layers deeper. In my opinion, it works a little bit easier.
Yeah, I would agree with both what Caley and Carrie said. I think, even looking at my background, when I first saw this job, it was kind of a mix, right? It was treasury and billing and accounts receivable, and I hadn't done a lot of those things. And quite honestly, I thought it was a little odd to have that mix of things. But, I think being open to new things and just saying, yep, I'm willing to try it, or I'll, do something different or learn something a little bit outside of where I'm at, and asking a lot of questions. I know, especially, if you get to an interview within my team, the finance team, and you have to talk to our CFO, he's really interested in just the questions that you're asking and kind of your thought process of what you're looking at, and being able to be willing to network with people. And because there's a lot of collaboration with our group, we've done a lot on the treasury side, the banking, investments, financing, different things to support our operations. And so, while I'm not, hands-on in the field or with the operations team, I'm on the executive team, so I'm constantly talking to, my colleagues throughout the company and trying to figure out what their needs are and what their plans are, and how I can help support all of that. So I think that's really important. We're very active in M&A and growth. We're a growth utility, and so people who can bring different things to that is very helpful for us. With kind of different skill sets and how you might be able to fit that in. I know a lot of people in the finance and accounting team don't have a background in utilities, and so a lot of us are on a learning curve, and things like the regulatory environment and that type of thing is challenging for some of us to learn. But and use those resources, it's very helpful.
And Andrea, I think, you're, as Caley said, a good example of someone who's kind of jumped into this industry from a periphery group. And I think that piece is important. You've probably had a learning curve on kind of the vernacular of the utility space. And I think that's true for a lot of industries, right? Everyone's got their own acronyms. I mean, I remember kind of learning some of the oil and gas ones. I literally have a glossary of terms because I had no idea what they meant. And I think that's certainly true for utilities. So if I could just offer you guys like one quick resource, we do have a free Coursera class online about utilities. take that at your own time. If you are looking seriously to make a transition, take the time to go through that course, get some vernacular under your belt. And I think that that will really show, you'll be able to speak to the industry a little bit better. You'll be able to understand some of these job postings a little bit more if you kind of have some of their vernacular along the way. That being said, you know, Caley, it's not just the vocab that's different. I think job titles are very different as well. So if someone's kind of redone their resume, they've kind of gone through, said, hey, these are my specific skill sets. This is how I think they can transfer. But then they're not really sure then to what jobs and titles and levels and positions to look at. I think that's a big challenge for folks as well. Andrea, you might have experienced this too. You know, you're not sure what level that was at. If you were kind of working on an executive team before, is that manager an executive? Or is that kind of on the leadership team? Is it not? Or, you know, if you're an engineer, where does that kind of fall in the utility space? So any advice for folks who are actually looking to do that, or how they can better filter through some of those roles and positions?
Yeah, I think one of the big misnomers when you first start, the Coursera course is really great, by the way. When I made my transition to learn more about power and utility to service those clients better, that was one of my first things I tapped. So it works great. You know, there's a lot of great books out there. Grid was an awesome one to kind of help walk you through kind of the background on the industry as well. And that's something that I would definitely pick up. It's kind of a fast read. And if you nerd out, it's a great way to kind of learn all of those kind of functions within the space. So looking for an actual title, you know, titles change. There's even title differential between organizations themselves. So when you're kind of thinking about how to identify where in the organization from a tiered structure, where those positions lie, I kind of think about it as like a cheat sheet, like a lead. Look for kind of keywords that make sense, that indicate a hierarchical structure. I can barely say that word, I apologize. I have to spell it out. Anyways, look at those kind of indicators. The other thing is dive deeper. So don't just look at the job title and then hit a fast apply. I think the fastest and best way to learn where you fit or could have a potential fit in a new industry or in a different organization style is actually read through the job description and truly understand, kind of nitpick it a little bit and say, like, where, you know, what are they actually asking for? Big things to take away be, what are they hoping for you to solve? Because each role is there to solve a problem for the organization at large. And really, even if you're a reservoir engineer, you know, you're solving a particular problem for an organization in oil and gas. Those same skill sets that you have might solve a different type of problem in the space, in a different space, right? For Xcel or for Summit or whoever you might be looking at. So really looking at the problem solving front of it would be really important.
Yeah, and I just want to add to what Caley said. You know, when you're looking at these job positions and to kind of build on what we were talking about, the different vernacular between the industries, I wouldn't get so hung up on like the words that you don't know. Because I mean, honestly, those are things that you can learn. And some of that vernacular, I'll be honest, is different from company to company. And even within Xcel Energy, like I showed, we have different operating companies. The vernacular is different between the operating companies too. So, you know, like Caley said, you know, really look at what like the posting is asking you to do. And if there are pieces of it that you don't understand, you're not familiar with, don't worry about that. Look past that.
Yeah, and ask questions. It's okay if you are in the middle of an interview or a screen with somebody and they drop a acronym. Ask what it means. Ask how it fits into the conversation and into what they're hoping for that role. Just so that you have clarity, don't just always assume. Sometimes the assumption can kill you quicker than asking the question can.
Yeah, that's true. And for those of us who have been around for a while, it's hard to know. I have a new employee and we had an all hands call yesterday. And after we finished, she's like, what does that mean? I have no idea. So I think and I said, oh, that's just a Summit term. So sorry, I should have told you about that before. So those things I think just slip out too. And sometimes you don't even realize it when you're talking to somebody outside of the company.
Yeah, absolutely. And but this could certainly help to get a leg up if you figure out a few of those. At least it'll put you on the right path to getting the answer to what some of those mean. We have a couple questions that came in that I think are good, both for Women's Energy Network to kind of supporting women in the industry. So first of all, thank you all, ladies, for being here. But it talks about basically kind of men over applying, right? Men over apply oftentimes for roles, which means they might not be fully qualified for them, and yet they still apply for them. Women aren't as likely to do that. Kind of with a lot more people looking for work right now, what would be some suggestions on maybe how women can maybe overcome some of those challenges for, not being seen for their potential, and Caley, maybe this could be something from the people side, but also I'd love to hear from Carrie and Andrea as well on maybe how they can set themselves apart so that they're seen for the potential that they have within an organization.
I think one of the big things is, everybody's heard the stat. Women, we love to make sure that we have 100% of the items that are on the job description before we hit the apply button, right? A couple of big things there is I think one leg up for women comes heavily based off of networking. I think women could learn to utilize their networks and tap those, like I call them weak connections and or strong connections, and ask for kind of informational introductions and things along those lines. And that kind of helps, for some reason, have a little bit more of a personal feel to it. So you feel ever so slightly more confident when you kind of apply for what would be considered a bit of a reach job for you. And I think that also we have to kind of change the perception that the hiring managers themselves are absolutely looking for 100% of what's on that job description list before they have a conversation or consider hiring you for that role. Really, that is a guideline that they have identified and highlighted the key skills that they are hoping to see. That is by no means a disqualifier in most situations. So definitely make sure that you kind of have the frame of mind that this is a door opener. This is what they're hoping to see. And you don't need to have all of them. So utilize that network to kind of help you with kind of giving you a little bit of confidence, I think.
Yeah, Caley, I can't agree with you more. Reaching out and just, if you have somebody on LinkedIn or other networks or whatever that can maybe do an introduction is always incredibly helpful. I know I've used it too, just for even trying to find out more about other people and other companies, other roles. I go back to the story of me joining Summit, right? I came from a really different background, multinational, moving money around the world, knew nothing about utilities. And when I applied for this position, there were kind of three big buckets of the role. And honestly, I had one of the three that I knew anything about. And so when I was going through the interview process, I was worried about it. And I thought, gosh, this is not going to probably work out. But, we just talked a lot about my approach and my thoughts and how I would go about doing something. And I guess it was enough for the CFO to say, I'm going to take a chance on her to join the company. But then I was able to bring a lot to the company that maybe wouldn't have been either, right? Like a little bit more proactive on our banking and cash management and structure and that type of thing that I kind of brought from the Silicon Valley. So we've got that now here at Summit, which maybe we wouldn't have had prior. So I think it just depends on the situation, and don't be afraid to just try it, right? The worst you can do is it doesn't work out, but you might have a good thing at the end. So
yeah, I think those are both great points, Andrea and Caley. And obviously, like maybe you don't meet every one of the bullet criteria that's listed in there, but maybe think about offsetting that with the other things that aren't on that list that you do bring to the table. Because I mean, you are a highly skilled individual and you do have a lot of experience. And just because you don't fit exactly what they're looking for, maybe you bring something that they didn't even know that they were looking for that might set you apart from some of the other applicants. So, turn the minus into a plus, really, with some of your other skills or highlights that you can bring to the table that they may not have necessarily thought of that they might need in that role.
And Carrie, I like that. Everybody knows who knows me. I'm a glass half full kind of gal. No matter what happens in the industry, what happens in the market, I'm going to be that positive force for you all, but hopefully give you some skills to do that. And because of that, we did get a question that came in. I think sometimes there can feel like there's a stigma if you worked in oil and gas, and then you want to transition either to renewables or the utility space. I guess my question would be, maybe to the three of you, because you've seen different applicants, Caley, kind of the recruitment side, trying to pair people up, Carrie and Andrea, as folks look to transition into these companies, you've seen resumes, things like that. Are there things or hurdles that people need to overcome, or if they're worried about their oil and gas background, how they're presenting themselves? Is that a real thing, first of all? We do live in a hyper politicized world. Sometimes it feels like an us and them, us oil and gas, them renewables, or vice versa. But in the utility space, is this something people should worry about? Should they address it? And then have you seen that at all as people are applying within your organizations? Caley, I don't know if you want to go first, and then maybe we can jump over to Carrie and Andrea on that one.
So I hear that concern.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely do. And it's something that I think a lot of people feel is like, it's a no-go conversation, right? I don't know that that's real. In all honesty, I think it's a misperception a lot of the times. We've had really good success with opening doors with people with different types of backgrounds. I mean, I think we've gone past the point in time, maybe 10 years ago when I first started my career, this was something that was a little bit stronger. Now I don't know if that's such the case. I think people are more focused on kind of the softer skills that, Andrea kind of presented, or Carrie, about, what they're looking for as far as the type of person on their approach to their work, the things that they can bring to the table. That are definitely unique. I think where oil and gas, that negativity on the oil and gas front can really kind of hurt you, is if you lead with that as a negative. I don't think you should make it a concern unless it's actually a concern that's voiced from the other party. So if you are the candidate in the conversation, you've been asked to the conversation table, and why would you put your first foot forward as being a negative in the commentary? It's kind of the same thing with women. Like when they have fewer of the job requirements, they oftentimes will put that on the table initially in the conversation, instead of doing what men do, which is tend to do in general, which is, put forth their strongest attributes and what they bring to the table first. So I think it's a little bit more finesse in conversations, but I don't think it's a real deal breaker for most times out there.
Yeah, and I think that's the point that I was hoping to get across, Caley, is that, it's lead with what you have and those skill sets that you bring, even though it's from a different sector of the industry. That's a positive, like that's a thing.
Absolutely.
And then to take the politicized pieces out of it, because that's not what this is. That's not what a job is. I think the world we live in is that, but that's not what this is, and really kind of what you bring and that positivity to it. So I think that piece is key. Carrie or Andrea, any pieces to add to that?
Yeah, so I'm totally 100% agree with Caley. I think it's kind of a misnomer that we work in different industries. I mean, at the end of the day, we're all in the energy industry, right? We're all energy professionals, and so I think maybe for me, I never really thought of it that way. And I know I didn't highlight this in my intro at the beginning of the webinar here, but I've actually worked at Xcel a few different times. I did a stint at BP in the middle. So I actually went from a utility to an oil company back to a utility. And it really wasn't until this opportunity to speak on this panel came up that made me realize that I actually have done that. I guess to me, I just looked at it as, I'm just earning another energy industry merit badge, right? Like I had my utility merit badge, and then I went to oil, I got that merit badge, and then I went back to my original merit badge there. So, I totally agree. I think it's a total misnomer that these are different industries. At the end of the day, we're all energy professionals.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess I would agree. I can't speak a lot outside of the sort of shared service component of where we support, but I don't think it matters really for us, right? It's more what value you can add. Typically in the shared service type thing when you're supporting. You can jump from company to company or industry to industry. You certainly have to learn a bit about it in terms and special things, but if you have that foundation, I think you can easily apply it to a utility.
Well, great. Well, I think, the last couple of questions we really kind of want to wrap up with is kind of like the future of the utility space. I mentioned a little before, there is this great crew change that's also as a part of utilities, but I think a lot of people are probably curious to find out, are there subsets of the utility space that might be growing faster than others, whether that's bringing on renewables or transmission pieces, but also, are there any additional trends, maybe Caley, that you've seen, as we look forward in the future, whether it's startups who are coming into the utility space, kind of disruptors, things like that? Where are some potentials for folks to be able to jump in, and maybe what are some of the growth projections, kind of looking at Xcel and Summit for you guys over the next few years?
Yeah, so there's so much opportunity in power and utilities. There just is. When you kind of talk about where the hiring trends are happening, they're happening across a couple big kind of buckets, if you think of it that way. So I like to think of, like, from a standpoint of operational improvements, kind of as its own little bucket. You think about the fact that a lot of these assets are getting changed out, they're getting modified, they're getting improved, they're adding in data kind of components and tracking into that. There's the new development kind of work. That's kind of another bucket, right? And with that comes a whole bunch of extra stuff. So you've got stuff with like regulatory and environmental, and there's a ton of service supply providers and product providers that are also great opportunities for a career shift into the industry itself. So if it's not just the big kind of operators themselves, or kind of generation, transmission, distribution, there's a whole group of people that service that industry at large, from data management standpoints, from regulatory and environmental, from an accounting and finance, from supply chain. There's a lot that's happening, but the general trends are tied to kind of the forward-facing elements of the improvement in the industry itself, whether that improvement comes from changing the fuel mix to meet carbon initiatives like Xcel is doing, or improvements in research and development of product lines that support better operations, safer operations for people, or improvements from a financial, how do we manage the accounting and financial growth that we're going to need in this space in order to make these things possible. And then like the continued improvement on communication and making sure that we're engaging with land use requirements, right? And all that kind of stuff that goes into these development projects. So there's a lot of opportunity depending on where your skill set comes from, whether that be from an engineering standpoint, or if that comes in from a different kind of corporate level support function. So kind of all over the board, but basically forward leaning, anything that's going to improve those areas of operations.
And then Carrie and Andrea, if you could speak to a little bit, maybe like Xcel's kind of growth potential, kind of what's looking for there, and Andrea, the same for Summit.
Yeah, so certainly for Xcel, with our carbon reduction goals, we are definitely transitioning our generation fleet, but we're also transitioning how we're serving our customers as well. So I think across the board, across all utilities, decarbonization is a big thing. And I think the industry as a whole recognizes that, whatever each individual utility's goals are, there's additional technology that still needs to be developed to help support those goals. And we fully recognize that, especially with our 100% carbon-free goal. The technology that we need to get to that goal doesn't exist today. So Sarah, you mentioned startups and things like that. I'm certain that there will be technology companies that will be emerging here in the soon future that will be developing new things to help us meet those goals. But definitely, Caley mentioned regulatory. That is certainly something that's going to be very important to utilities as we go into the future, especially as the industry is changing. Policy and regulatory structure is set up for the old utility paradigm. And so that's all going to have to change. And we're going to have to rethink the regulatory aspect and the policy aspect. So certainly some of those things. And I think too, for Xcel, I think, we're really challenging ourselves to rethink how we serve our customers and how we connect with our customers. So definitely a lot more community outreach on our side, a lot more environmental awareness and things like that. Another emerging trend across the industry is a lot more electrification of the economy. So especially like electric vehicles, that's going to be a big thing coming down the future. So there's definitely a lot of areas that are growing that aren't necessarily kind of the bread and butter of a typical utility, so to speak, but there will be so many more new emerging areas as we move into the future.
Yep, and I agree. I mean, even though we're a small utility, right, we're still looking at decarbonization, renewables, power to gas, big ESG focus right now, working with policymakers. We have someone on our team who's, that's all she does. She came from a political background and she helps us out with that within the company. One of the reasons we went to Maine in the first place is because most of our customer base there use fuel oil, and now working on getting them onto natural gas. So we're continuing to do that too, looking forward to other acquisitions that would mix well within our portfolio. So we're certainly looking at a lot of different things, like Xcel, maybe on a little bit smaller scale, but the same type of thing. So and just really a focus based on our communities as well. We've got a big program. Each employee is allowed to do 20 hours of volunteer work every year in their community that they get paid for. So those types of things are important for us as a company.
Yeah, that's great. And, just to piggyback real quickly, I think, big buckets that I see from student base and then my conversations with companies would be, land, folks who have an oil and gas background in land. I think there's a lot of potential for you to move into the utility space, both the transmission, as we look to bring more renewables online, kind of permitting those spaces. You have a vast history of being able to do that in the oil and gas space. A lot of these projects are on government and public lands. Your expertise would be well used there. Regulation, oh my gosh, you think oil and gas is regulated? Welcome to utilities. You have a job for life. That's also a place that actually needs people with more experience in the industry. Oftentimes they have, even if it is the oil and gas side, who understand regulations and how that works. And oftentimes people in those roles have no experience, have never been out to a power plant, much like it is in oil and gas. So that's a great opportunity to come in and support the industry that way. Data analytics is huge as we bring on more and more, or trying to decarbonize, right? Really running those scenarios, figuring out the data. You think oil and gas, again, has a lot of data. Imagine a meter at every single person's house, monitoring every single one of their appliances, monitoring. I mean, it's just insane the amount of information that's there. And if that's a skill set you have, fantastic way to kind of make a jump. So as you kind of dissect your resume, is that a skill set you have? And then look at companies, both large like Xcel, but also these kind of startups and stuff that are vendors for some of these larger organizations. So that's a great way to do it as well. So I'd encourage that. Just to wrap up, we had a couple questions about educational resources. We will have a slide here. Sally will put it up for us of resources that we have for everyone. One was that career transitions, renewables webinar that we had, kind of that free online course to get your vernacular, get your vocab up to date so you can actually apply for some of these jobs and positions. That global energy talent index. Want to make sure you have the resources you need there. And so I know we didn't get to quite all the questions here, but really Carrie and Andrea and Caley, thank you so much for joining us today, adding your expertise to this conversation. We could talk for a while on it. Again, it's such a broad subsector of the industry, so we really, really appreciate your time, both in the industry, but then taking the time today to kind of chat with everyone. So we'll send a follow-up email to everyone on the webinar with these resources and stuff as well. Again, Women Energy Network is a great place to kind of jump in, connect with us here. We're on every platform you've got on social media, so no excuses. If you don't want to talk energy, come and join one of our kind of fun networking, kind of women workout and wine, kind of unwind a little bit with us as well. Or professionally, if you're looking to jump in, we're also happy to help there. So again, again, thanks everyone so much for your time. And we really appreciate it. And we'll keep bringing you some educational resources. So thanks.